In the sleek, glass-walled offices of Apex Marketing, where every footstep echoed with authority and the stark white glow of fluorescent lights cast a cold sheen over the obsidian marble floor, a can of Coca-Cola, unopened and weaponized, hurtled toward Nina Thompson. She was the company's only black employee and a young strategic analyst. The reddish-brown liquid splashed across her natural curls and soaked the navy blue blouse she had carefully chosen that morning, not to impress, but to project professionalism and confidence for her first presentation to senior investors. Instead of acknowledgement, she was met with sneers and derision. "Oh my God, I think you need to refresh those dull ideas of yours." Jessica Whitmore, Nina's manager, shrieked with biting sarcasm. She slammed the empty Coke can onto the table like a trophy and turned away, as if she had just delivered a harmless office prank. From across the room, Brad Mitchell, the account coordinator, swiftly raised his iPhone 15 to capture the scene. "Look, everyone, the company's diversity initiative is getting a Coca-Cola shower," he shouted, laughing, his eyes scanning the office for approval. Not to be outdone, HR assistant Samantha Chun tapped away on her phone and giggled. "When you hire for quotas instead of talent, reality check." Nina stood motionless. Drops of soda dripped onto the documents she had painstakingly prepared over the past week, smudging charts, growth plans, and strategic proposals she had hoped would be a solid stepping stone for her future. But to those around her, it was all just meaningless paper. At 29, Nina was the first in her family to graduate from college, a prestigious public university she attended on a full scholarship, earned through relentless effort. She had believed that competence could overcome prejudice. But at Apex, all they saw was her skin color and the quota she represented. Jessica approached, her heels clicking on the tile like a deliberate drumbeat of mockery. The overpowering scent of Chanel No. 5 mingled with the sticky sweetness of spilled Coke, creating a suffocating mix. "You know what your problem is, Nina," she hissed, each word like a blade. "You don't know your place. You think a cheap degree qualifies you to sit at the same table as us?" The office froze. A few colleagues glanced up, then quickly looked away. No one spoke. No one intervened. But in Nina's eyes, there was no fear. There was the silent accumulation of someone long accustomed to being underestimated. That silence wasn't weakness. It was the seed of something deeper, stronger, like a storm gathering just beyond the horizon. The glass-walled conference room seemed to turn to stone. From the outside, it resembled a giant fishbowl, where so-called colleagues now stood by, silent, indifferent. Some stared intently at their laptop screens, others turned away as if preoccupied, breathing in the air of cowardice. No one stood up. No one dared to speak. It was the Friday before a holiday weekend, and the office was sparsely populated. Precisely why they chose this day. A calculated humiliation, scripted like an internal project, to satisfy the egos of those accustomed to privilege. Nina closed her eyes for a moment. She inhaled deeply, not to suppress, but to summon the strength that no one in that room realized she possessed. When she opened her eyes, her gaze burned like a flame, causing Jessica to step back, not out of fear, but confusion. That look wasn't from someone about to cry, but from someone about to make the final move in a silent chess game. Without a word, Nina picked up her phone. The screen was sticky with soda, but her fingers moved decisively. Brad leaned in, his camera still recording his mocking voice loud. "Calling your mom or your Uber boyfriend? I bet he lives in the Bronx and takes the subway here, huh?" Samantha burst out laughing, indifferent to right or wrong. "You guys are too much. But seriously, Nina, hard to pretend to be the boss on an assistant's salary, right?" They didn't know. They had never known, and never cared to find out. In their eyes, Nina was the diversity hire, the face of the inclusion campaign, the quota filler. But nowhere in her dry HR file did it mention that she was the wife of Alexander Sterling, the founder and CEO of one of America's most powerful venture capital tech conglomerates. The man once dubbed the brain behind every software revolution of the decade. She wasn't just an employee trying to survive. She was a queen disguised as a pawn. "Go ahead," Nina said softly, almost gently, but the chill that swept through the room was undeniable. Her fingers typed a short message on the screen. "Activate." She smiled, not because she accepted the humiliation, but because she knew, in this exact moment, everything had begun to shift. The game they thought they controlled had never been theirs to begin with. "You just made the best decision of your lives," Nina said firmly, each word slicing through the air like a blade. Her gaze was steady, locked on Jessica, not with emotion, but with the cold certainty of someone who had moved beyond fear. Jessica stepped back, frowning. "What the hell are you talking about? You cracked from the sugar high?" Nina tilted her wrist slightly, revealing a classic Patek Philippe watch. Elegant, refined, and deliberate. A wedding gift no one in the office had ever noticed, because in their eyes, she didn't deserve anything more than the bottom rung of the corporate ladder. 15 minutes, she said, as calmly as if announcing a train departure. Not a threat, not a warning, just a fact. Brad, still holding his phone, stopped recording. The smugness faded from his face, replaced by a flicker of doubt. 15 minutes for what? Are you nuts? Samantha, quicker to sense the shift, suddenly froze. She realized it wasn't Nina's voice that gave her chills. It was the eerie calm surrounding her. Nina wasn't trembling, wasn't angry, wasn't crying. She was perfectly still, as if everything was unfolding exactly as she had planned from the start. Then, ding! A soft sound, yet sharp enough to slice through the thick air like a razor. All eyes turned to the private elevator, the one reserved for the highest executives, rarely seen in use. But today its polished metal doors began to open slowly, inch by inch, like a stage revealing its lead actor. 3 security officers stepped out first. Tall, dressed in black uniforms, eyes resolute. They weren't searching. They knew exactly who they were there for. Each step they took sounded deliberate, like a countdown for those about to face consequences. And then emerging behind them was a man who made the entire room go still. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a stride that was both unhurried and commanding, clad in a flawlessly tailored Tom Ford suit, the embodiment of indisputable success. But it wasn't the suit that took the breath out of the room. It was the man wearing it. Solution, be honest? Alexander Sterling. There was no mistaking the name. One of the most influential figures in East Coast fintech, founder of Sterling Enterprises, a venture capital powerhouse with stakes in over a dozen global startups. And the last person anyone at Apex ever imagined would set foot on the 42nd floor, let alone walk into their office. The silence was absolute. Brad held his breath. Samantha took a step back. Jessica was frozen in place. Alexander stopped beside Nina. He didn't say a word, just looked. And in his eyes was a storm held at bay, a rage refined into the cold authority of a man seasoned in both boardrooms and political arenas. Have you ever witnessed a moment where silence was more terrifying than any scream? A moment when power didn't need an introduction, only presence? This was that moment. "You okay, Na?" Alexander Sterling's deep, sharp voice sliced through the silence like a finely honed blade. If looks could kill, the three of them, Jessica, Brad, and Samantha, would have been buried beneath the building's marble floor. They had no idea they had crossed a line that couldn't be undone, nor that the woman they had just tried to humiliate was the one about to rewrite the rules of the corporate game. If this story already feels drenched in justice and the sweet power of revenge, hit that follow button, because this is just the beginning of a masterclass in turning the tables you won't want to miss. Alexander moved swiftly to his wife's side, his gaze shifting from concern to tightly controlled fury as he saw the sticky mess of Coca-Cola on her. Droplets still trickled from her hair, soaking into the white collar beneath her navy blouse. "Security," he commanded, voice steely. "Remove these three from the building immediately." Jessica tried to compose herself, stepping forward with disbelief in her voice. "Excuse me, but who exactly do you think you are? This is our office, and Nina is our employee." "No," Alexander said coolly, stepping protectively in front of his wife, his expression making it clear no one would touch her again. "This is my office. Sterling Enterprises is Apex Marketing's largest shareholder." The sound of Brad's iPhone hitting the marble floor echoed like a harsh wake-up call. Samantha turned pale, her trembling fingers flying across LinkedIn. There it was. Chairman and CEO, Sterling Enterprises, Alexander Sterling, net worth $7,800,000,000, 0 cents. That's the problem when you judge people solely by appearances. Nina finally spoke, gently dabbing her face with a tissue. "You never bothered to find out who I really am." Nina Thompson Sterling's story began 4 years earlier when she, then a full-ride student in artificial intelligence at MIT, met Alexander at a machine learning symposium. What started as an academic debate blossomed into a love story that defied social barriers and inspired countless young scholars. "Then why are you working here?" Jessica stammered, utterly unmoored, unable to connect the woman she had belittled daily with the wife of one of New York's most powerful men. Nina smiled softly, for the first time since the Coke can had spilled down her head. "Because I believe in earning my own worth, not inheriting it. I wanted to prove myself without leaning on the Sterling name." For 6 months, while they laughed at her expense, Nina Thompson had quietly built a silent counteroffensive. She didn't complain, didn't push back. She watched and documented every email laced with insults, every meeting where her ideas were blatantly stolen, every dismissive glance that treated her like she didn't exist. Everything from security footage to audio recordings and internal correspondence was meticulously cataloged, encrypted, and stored in a high-security cloud database. It wasn't about revenge. It was about knowing that in a world where truth is easily distorted, evidence is the one voice that can't be silenced. She stood there, in the very room that had once witnessed her quiet endurance, now transformed into a stage where truth took the spotlight. "You thought I was weak because I stayed silent," she said, not loudly but with the clarity of a clock striking the final hour. "But you were wrong. Dignity is not submission, and patience is not acceptance." At that moment, the elevator doors opened again. Entering the already taut room was a sharply dressed man in a gray suit, his stride purposeful, his gaze razor-sharp. Marcus Chun, Chief Legal Counsel for Sterling Enterprises. Not only Alexander's trusted legal strategist, Marcus was also the officiant at Alexander and Nina's wedding, and the keeper of a file that would make denial impossible. He opened a high-end leather briefcase and carefully removed 3 thick folders, each stamped in red. Confidential, legal evidence. No introduction was necessary. He simply handed each folder to the individuals involved. Jessica took the first one. Her eyes darted over the densely packed pages of proof. Her face went from pale to ashen, as if each page stripped away another layer of her pretense. Brad stood frozen as he saw a transcript from a team meeting where he had laughed after stealing one of Nina's proposals and passed it off as our team's idea. Samantha trembled, recoiling as she recognized screenshots of her own Instagram post, mocking photos of Nina eating alone, paired with a biting caption. "I'm holding documentation of sustained psychological harassment, racial discrimination, and the deliberate creation of a hostile work environment," Marcus declared. He didn't raise his voice, but every word landed like a hammer on the marble floor. You see it? Nina hadn't chosen to scream. She hadn't chosen impulsive retaliation. She chose preparation, chose strategy, a form of justice delivered not through pain, but through undeniable truth. What do you think of how she handled it? Would you act like Nina or follow your gut reaction? Share your thoughts. Because the next phase of this reckoning is going to shake the entire system to its core. Fred, unable to take it any longer, shouted, "This is ridiculous. We were just joking. She never complained." Alexander picked up Brad's phone, still recording, and replayed the video. Brad's voice rang out crystal clear. "Look, the diversity initiative is getting a Coke shower." The footage showed him laughing, sneering, mocking Nina for supposedly living in the Bronx and commuting by subway, an undeniable display of the ugly prejudice woven into every word. Samantha broke down, her voice choked with tears. "I have bills to pay, a family to support." "Interesting," Nina said coldly. "I have a family too. My mother's a nurse, my father drives a bus. They worked their whole lives so I could get an education. And you think that makes me lesser?" What the three of them didn't know was that in the past few weeks, Nina had quietly developed and deployed a new data analytics system capable of boosting Apex's operational efficiency by up to 47%. The project, worth millions, was exclusively registered under her name. Every step had been calculated. "You have 30 minutes to gather your personal belongings," Alexander declared with icy finality. "Any act of retaliation will result in immediate legal action." In a panic, Jessica turned to the colleague still frozen in place. "You're all just going to let this happen? Everyone knows what she's like." An eerie silence settled. Many avoided eye contact, faces turned downward. Then Tom Williams from IT stepped forward. "Actually, Jessica, a lot of us respect Na's work. You're the one who made this place toxic." As Secure approached, Nina gathered her laptop and personal documents. She paused beside Jessica, leaned in and whispered, "You know what's ironic? I was planning to resign today, but you just handed me something far more valuable." The Patek Philippe watch on her wrist, a wedding gift from Alexander, read exactly 3:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, the entire company would receive a memo detailing revolutionary changes to its diversity and inclusion policies. Nina turned to her husband, gently touching his hand. "I want to use this moment for something bigger, not just payback." Alexander nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "The scholarship fund I told you about," she whispered. "Exactly. 4 exceptional black students in tech would be granted scholarships, funded by the equity once held by the 3 bullies. What they mistook for weakness was in fact the quiet power of those who know how to be patient, gather evidence, and wait for the perfect moment to turn personal injustice into systemic change." But the game wasn't over. The true impact of that Friday afternoon was only beginning. Downstairs in the main auditorium, Apex Marketing's digital systems were nearly overwhelmed as Marcus Chun prepared to project a presentation onto the giant screen titled Evidence of Hostile Work Environment, Thompson v. Apex Marketing. What do you think will happen next? Can a corporation escape justice when the truth has been laid bare? Share your thoughts, because the next turn of events will send shockwaves through the entire industry. An emergency all-hands meeting was immediately called. Every Apex Marketing employee gathered in the grand auditorium. Officially, the meeting was to clarify critical structural changes, but the air was thick with tension. All eyes were fixed on the massive screen as Marcus Chun prepared to show something no one had anticipated. Panicked, Jessica lunged toward Marcus, trying to grab his laptop. "No, you can't. This is a violation of privacy," she screamed. Alexander crossed his arms and gave a cold smile. "Invasion of privacy? Like the emails you sent to this entire department?" he replied. The screen lit up with a message. "The new diversity hire just arrived today. I bet she won't last a month. Anyone want to wager how long before she's back in the projects?" Sender: Jessica Whitmore. Brad turned ghostly pale as the next slide revealed screenshots from a WhatsApp group named Elite Apex, where he had posted daily photos of Nena with captions like, "Found the missing housekeeper" and "Someone call her an Uber." Samantha's mouth fell open as her own Instagram post appeared. One secretly filmed clip of Nena eating lunch alone, tagged with the cruel hashtag, "When someone joins initiative but nobody cares." 6 months. Nena stepped into the center of the auditorium, her voice calm yet chilling. "For 6 months, you created the perfect digital archive of your own discriminatory behavior. Screenshots, recordings, videos. HR has copies of everything," she continued as a new slide appeared that took the breath out of the room. Project Prometheus, Predictive Marketing Analytics System. Author Nina Thompson Sterling. Estimated value $47 million, 0 cents. Status: patented. "While you were busy mocking me," Enos said, scanning the crowd, "I developed an algorithm that could revolutionize the entire marketing analytics industry." Alexander stepped forward to finish the announcement. "Sterling Enterprises has acquired exclusive rights to this technology, and every cent of profit from this project for the next 20 years will go directly to the Nina Thompson Fund, scholarships for young black students in tech." "And where would the initial funding come from?" "From the forced sale of your shares in the company," he said, clearly nodding toward the 3 disgraced employees. Brad stood up one last time, trying to fight back. "This is blackmail. We'll sue you." Marcus calmly adjusted his glasses. "Blackmail is when you threaten someone to gain something illegal. We're simply disclosing evidence of hate speech, workplace harassment, and systemic racism. And those actions," he added, "under New York state law can result in up to 5 years in prison." The next slide appeared, the company org chart. 3 red boxes lit up. Jessica Whitmore, Brad Mitchell, Samantha Chun. Notation beneath: immediate termination, just cause. Jessica screamed, tears of rage streaking her face. "You can't fire us for cause. We'll fight this all the way." "Go ahead," Nina said softly, as if everything had been settled long ago. "But first I suggest you rewatch the video Brad so helpfully recorded today, when he threw Coca-Cola on me and shouted about a diversity shower." The video played. Brad's voice rang out. Clear, unmistakable. "I bet she lives in the Bronx and took the subway here today." The auditorium fell into suffocating silence. There was nothing left to say. Everyone now had to confront the truth about themselves and what they had allowed to happen. What do you think of how Nina handled everything? Is this modern justice or a powerful reminder that silence does not mean weakness, but can be the most dangerous strength of all? Share your thoughts. And stay tuned, the final chapter will leave you breathless. Scattered applause broke out across the auditorium, mingling with the heavy silence of lowered eyes and deep shame. Many employees, once silent spectators to months of misconduct, could no longer deny the reality. They had watched it all unfold for 6 months and did nothing to stop it. Alexander stepped forward, his voice commanding. Sterling Enterprises will roll out a new compliance program across all of its subsidiaries. Any business wishing to maintain a contract with us will undergo rigorous and transparent audits on diversity and inclusion. Samantha sobbed uncontrollably. My career, my reputation, it's all ruined. Your reputation? Nye turned to her, eyes ice cold. You spent 6 months building a system to destroy mine. Now you're tasting the consequences of your own actions. The final slide appeared. Title: The Nina Thompson Fund. Initial commitment: $50 million, 0 cents. Goal: 1,000 full scholarships for young women of color in tech over the next 5 years. $15 million? Brad gasped. From where? From the discrimination penalties the 3 of you will be paying, Nina explained. From clawed-back bonuses. And from my personal contribution. She looked each of them in the eye, every word deliberate. Oh, and every company you plan to apply to in the future will receive a complete file on this case. Good luck explaining why you were fired for documented racial discrimination. Jessica collapsed to her knees, finally grasping the full weight of what had happened. Please, I have rent due, I have bills to pay. How ironic, Nina replied, her voice even and resounding through the room like a cold verdict. I had those too, when you sabotaged my project, stole my ideas, and made me question whether I even deserved to be here. The difference is I turned my pain into action, you turned your privilege into cruelty. Security began escorting the 3 out of the auditorium. On the screen, the final message appeared. True diversity doesn't come from quotas, it comes from recognizing that talent has no color, no class, and no zip code. The auditorium erupted in thunderous applause, but at the center of the stage, Nina Thompson Sterling stood tall. The Coca-Cola had long dried on her shirt, but her dignity had never faded. And the legacy she had just launched was only beginning. What no one in that room could have foreseen, that moment wasn't just a personal victory. It was the beginning of a movement poised to reshape the entire tech industry in the years to come, by proving that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin with one person refusing to accept the role others try to assign them. 6 months later, the Metropolitan Opera House in Manhattan had not a single empty seat. The audience waited eagerly for the premiere of the documentary Code Nina: How Workplace Racism Sparked a Revolution. As the spotlight illuminated the stage, Nina Thompson Sterling stepped forward in a sleek black Armani suit. Not to impress, but because now she had the power to choose her style without fear of judgment. The day they threw Coca-Cola on me, she began, her voice echoing through the historic hall, they didn't know they were watering a seed. That seed has grown into opportunity for 347 young people of color who are now on full scholarships in technology. Cameras panned across the auditorium. Fortune 500 CEOs, civil rights leaders, and most prominently, the first recipients of the Nina Thompson Fund. Brilliant young minds from marginalized communities, now studying at MIT, Stanford, and Harvard. The documentary Code Nina didn't just end in thunderous applause. It opened a new chapter of truth. with revelations that left the entire auditorium stunned. Jessica Whitmore once tried to sue Nena for defamation and emotional distress, but the case was quickly withdrawn by her own attorney after reviewing the overwhelming, irrefutable evidence. Brad Mitchell, rejected from 23 consecutive job interviews, now earns a living delivering food via an app, a job he once used to mock others. Samantha Chun left the city, moving to a secluded rural town. She deleted all her social media accounts and, according to some sources, now spends most of her time writing apology letters, none of which have ever been answered. The greatest irony, Nena shared in an interview, is that 3 days before they threw Coca-Cola on me, I had just completed an AI algorithm designed to detect patterns of discrimination in workplace environments. Their misconduct provided the final puzzle piece to perfect the system. The application Equihire developed by Nena has now been adopted by over 1,200 companies worldwide. In its first quarter alone, it generated $180 million, 0 cents in revenue. All profits were funneled into expanding the scholarship program for young people of color. Tech giants like Microsoft, Google, and Apple signed a historic agreement to integrate the system into their hiring processes. Tom Williams, the IT colleague who spoke up for Nena at that defining moment, is now Chief Technology Officer for the Diversity Division at Sterling Enterprises. Watching Nena turn humiliation into revolution made me realize, Tom told the front page of the New York Times, that silence in the face of injustice is its own kind of complicity. The most emotional moment of the evening came when Marcus Thompson, Nena's father, took the stage, a retired bus driver who had worked 40 years to put his daughter through school. He held up the Nobel Peace Prize she had just received, becoming the first black woman honored for technological innovation in social justice. "My daughter has always been brilliant," he said, his voice breaking, "but all they saw was her skin color. Now the world sees her mind." On the big screen, a familiar image appeared, the former headquarters of Apex Marketing. The company had filed for bankruptcy after losing all its contracts with Sterling Enterprises and its partners. That building, once the site of Nena's public humiliation, now bore a new name, the Nanina Thompson Institute for Tech Equity. Here, hundreds of young people of color are developing AI solutions to combat systemic racism, not just as a dream, but as a growing reality. Do you believe that one person, no matter how small, can change an entire system? Will you choose silence or rise up? Share your thoughts, because Nena's journey is just one of millions that need to be told, and you might be the one to write the next chapter. Jessica Whitmore made one final appearance on a little-known podcast, trying to restore her image by playing the victim. "I lost everything over a stupid joke," she sobbed. But the video quickly went viral, not out of sympathy, but because it became the textbook example of how privilege can blind people to the consequences of their own actions. The comments were merciless. "You didn't lose everything over a joke. You're simply reaping what you sowed through years of racism." On the grand stage of the auditorium, Nena closed her speech with a line that would later be printed on posters in schools, boardrooms, and social justice campaigns. They asked me if this was revenge. I said it's justice. Revenge destroys, justice builds. I turned every drop of that Coca-Cola into fuel to change an entire system. She paused, scanning the auditorium with unwavering eyes. Because the greatest revolution isn't about tearing down our oppressors. It's about building ladders so others don't have to fall into the same pit we once did. As she stepped off the stage, Nena's phone buzzed softly. A message had arrived. from a 16-year-old girl in the Bronx. Mr. Sterling, I just got accepted into the scholarship program. I'm the first in my family to go to college. Thank you for not giving up that day. Nana smiled, and the memory of her words echoed in her mind. You just made the best decision of your lives. And they had, just not in the way they expected. A year later, the term Nanina effect was officially introduced into academic curriculum. It was used to describe how one individual, when faced with systemic racism, could ignite transformative change. Jessica, Brad, and Samantha became textbook examples in business school courses on the consequences of bias in corporate environments. Meanwhile, Nena Thompson Sterling continued her journey, turning every act of injustice into an opportunity to build a better society. The lesson was clear. In that office, 3 people chose the path of hatred, and they lost everything. One chose the path of justice, and she changed the world. Because in the end, racism doesn't just destroy its victims, it destroys, first and foremost, those who spread it. Have you ever witnessed an injustice that, if handled differently, could have turned into a positive turning point? Share your story of resilience in the comments below. If this journey of justice and transformation moved you, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the truest revenge isn't destroying those who hurt us. It's building a world where no one else ever has to be hurt the way we were.